What is your predicted date for when China invades Taiwan?
I gotta think. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say 2026.
2026?
I saw there was a big memo that went around the Pentagon and got into the media. It was written by a 4-star general in the Air Force, and he had it at 2025. He said, and it was based on nothing really but he literally said, "My gut is telling me we fight in 2025."
All right, everybody, welcome to the Angel Research Podcast. We are here as usual today to discuss the market's hottest stock stories and investment opportunities. Today we have Mr. Jason Simpkins with us. Jason is the founder and investment director of the investment advisory service Secret Stock Files. He also writes for the contrarian investing newsletter Outsider Club. And today we're going to talk about the aerospace and defense industry, Jason's top stock picks in the sector, the shifting geopolitical landscape, developments in modern warfare, and most excitingly, the Chinese spy balloon.
Yes.
Jason, what's going on with that Chinese spy balloon?
What isn't going on with the spy balloon? Everyone's been talking about it for, I guess, at least the past week. It really struck a nerve, didn't it? Like, we've had so many instances of hacking scandals, particularly as they relate to China. But this one seemed to get at people in a really visceral way. I think the physicality of it, the fact that it was actually just like in our airspace hovering over us. I think the confusion around it, like, wait, why didn't we know about this sooner? Why aren't we shooting it down? What is it collecting? What exactly is happening right now? I think that kind of adds to it. But I think this one really, really seemed to strike a nerve with people that I haven't seen with previous scandals.
So why didn't we know about it sooner?
Yeah, that's a good question for the military. I can tell you, so they say it happened at least 4 other times. And these were balloons that were dispatched off the coast of California and then one off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia, where we have a lot of our coastal bases. And so I don't think they loitered as much. They certainly didn't cross the continental United States.
Yeah.
I think they were briefer trips. The balloons, the kind of technology themselves, they don't really show up on radar so much. It's why they use them. It's not like flying a plane over, really.
Why is that?
The altitude and the size, the profile of it.
Okay, gotcha.
So they're just kind of a little bit harder to notice. And then if they weren't staying very long, and then they are hard to perceive as like the naked eye. There was a story once of in World War II there was a battleship off the coast of the United States, and they thought that they saw a high altitude balloon or some kind of like reconnaissance airship, and they started shooting at it and they couldn't make contact, and then eventually they realized they were shooting at the planet Venus. It was just that they could see this distant planet, given the clear sky and that time, and they were just shooting at a planet, not realizing that it wasn't a balloon at all. So they can be kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Might expect more from our military.
Sure. Well, I was going to say, and what 60, however many years later, more than half a century later,
balloons are making a comeback in a weird way. The United States is working with them too. This is a big push to get.
Sorry, that's balloons are making a comeback. It's just like
look, you thought they were just for birthday parties,
yeah.
But no, they're because it's this move. It's kind of going up in the atmosphere in terms of you have traditional the Air Force and defense. The big thing now for militaries around the world is that low Earth orbit. It's the outer reaches of the atmosphere, where that is kind of the new ball game in terms of getting the highest ground that you can get, in terms of being able to get that bird's eye view, in terms of being able to, dominate from the top up. There's a reason that the United States military in particular has a major focus on air superiority, on maintaining, the fittest, most powerful air force. It's because if you're, dominating the skies, if you're dominating the highest point, then you're obviously in the best position. China in particular is pushing that out. And that's why they are conducting all these space missions too. I mean, this is why they've got, lunar orbiters going around the moon. They're trying to, a lot of people think and believe, and maybe rightly, that they have long-term plans for some kind of space base on the moon, even potentially a weapon. And there are international rules that say you can't weaponize space. I think it's clear China doesn't care about those.
Sure.
Okay? Like, it doesn't seem like they're going to hold a lot of water. And I think if we get back to this particular balloon instance, if we can call it that, this balloon scandal, it's that, it's a real flagrant violation. It's kind of like they just did this. It seemed like not really caring if they'd get caught. It's the brazenness of it that they're just sending these balloons out, canvassing the entire planet with them.
Do you think that maybe they're trying to send a message to us? Like, is it kind of a latent threat more so than a reconnaissance?
I think it can be both. I think they were obviously getting some kind of information out of it. What that is to be determined. I mean, I know just the latest reports, it was all just like, I know that there was a lot of antennae and I think, probably like high definition photography equipment, cameras, that kind of thing. So it seemed like the object was to get visual data, visual intelligence, as well as try to intercept communications.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also a prototype for potentially future weapons, because that was the other thing that came out, which was that back in 2018, China's state-run television channel, they had a whole segment where these same balloons were carrying hypersonic glide vehicles.
All right, cool. I wanted to talk about the hypersonics next because you've been talking about hypersonics for, a year?
Yeah.
And talking about the hypersonics and the defense against them. Yeah, I mean, that's scary stuff because if they're the jet stream is kind of in their favor, right? And these balloons are relatively cheap to make.
Right.
So they could potentially just
a little
float
bit
a bunch
harder
of...
to detect too, like
yeah.
I said. And then, like the other thing about with hypersonic, the glide vehicles, right? They go up into low Earth orbit. They have a rocket. It shoots them up there. They decouple from that rocket, and then they do what's in their name. They glide.
Yeah.
And so the thing about it though is that when they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, they actually tend to go slower. They slow down a bit because they no longer have a rocket propelling them. They're now gliding down. And so...
But if you launch it from a balloon that's already up there...
Right. I think potentially they're trying to find a way maybe to shorten that trip even.
Yeah.
But we also know with China that they already have long-range weapons. We know that they have what the military termed to be first strike hypersonic weapons. They had a vehicle that basically circled the entire planet in about an hour and, was able to kind of perform a flight that we are not capable of matching right now. And it really stunned a lot of the Pentagon because it seemed like this, like I said, it was a first strike. Like, this isn't a response weapon. This isn't what you roll out after you've been attacked. It's what you launch when you have, an opportunity to attack your enemy and try to debilitate their nuclear arsenal first and to try to go at them first. And so it seems like they maybe are probing new ways. I'd also imagine that with the balloons and, the information that they're collecting atmospheric information, and they're also probably collecting logistical information. All of that's going to help them with long-range targeting. Because if you are shooting things from over the horizon, from halfway around the world, then that targeting obviously gets more and more challenging.
Sure.
And so you want the best information you can possibly get on it. And so they probably got, a lot of good up-to-date information about, just where our bases are, what they would aim for, try to narrow that margin of error when they do shoot. And then I also know one more thing with the balloons too. One thing, the reason they do like them as opposed to satellites, which are another thing that we know to be blanketing low Earth orbit, it's that balloons can stay in one spot and give you a consistent basic feed, as opposed to a satellite which continues to move in circle. So the idea of having kind of a stationary, even if temporary, satellite is appealing to a lot of nations right now.
What I mean, this is all pretty scary stuff. I feel like, and
yeah.
I don't think anyone should be like, losing sleep over it because there's nothing you can really do about it. But do we have a legitimate defense against those kinds of long-range missiles or
Not
hypersonic
really.
missiles? Or
No. Honestly, when you go look at the U.S. missile defense system, and it has varying components, but even on its best day against modern nuclear weapons, against warheads, like even the kind that Russia had, even going back before hypersonics, that could effectively break off into as many as 6 or a dozen separate warheads. Trying to intercept those kinds of things is just exceptionally difficult. And on our best day, we're talking about a missile defense system that was conceived and first built in the 1970s, really, in the 60s. It's Cold War era stuff. And so a lot of that was going to be insufficient no matter what. But the glide vehicles and now the hypersonic speeds of going Mach 5 or faster, right now, no, there's not a credible defense for that. They are upgrading it. Northrop Grumman got that contract. That was awarded last year, I think, to basically upgrade the Minuteman system. Those are the ground-based deterrents, the missiles and the silos that are supposed to protect us. That whole system's being upgraded. And obviously a main focus is to ensure that upgrade does, in fact, help counter these threats.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that they definitely work to implement as they do this whole new ground-based system. But a lot of it's challenging. If you have the intelligence that they're going to launch an attack, it makes it somewhat easier because the United States has assets in the Pacific. Because with that glide vehicle, you'd want to shoot it on the way up if possible.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if the rocket's going up, you want to get it there.
You recently wrote an article about these assets, essentially the U.S. building bases is it the Philippines?
Oh yeah,
and then China with the artificial islands. Could you kind of give us a rundown of that whole situation?
Yeah, over in the South China Sea. So yeah, this happened roughly the same week. And you're talking about sending a message. I don't know, maybe it's just coincidence, but as it was widely publicized, too, that Anthony Blinken was going to make a trip over to China, and then it was canceled because of the balloon incident. And that he's the Secretary of State. And also, but last week, the United States signed a new deal with the Philippines to rotate troops in 4 bases in the Philippines. Because the United States used to have permanent bases, but that ended in 1992. Because, there was a whole kind of anti-colonial thing. The vote was actually pretty close. I think it was like 12-11 to basically move U.S. forces outside. But the new Filipino Constitution prohibited permanent foreign forces from being there. So,
but they make an exception for the U.S.
Well,
is that
the compromise now is that the troops rotate in and out. So they're not there permanently. They're just rotating, in and out. They're on a temporary basis. And the Philippines are incredibly important because they are Taiwan's closest neighbor outside of mainland China. There's really not much ocean between the Philippines and Taiwan.
Yeah, we should throw up a map.
Yeah, that South China Sea area, it's a very hotly contested area because if we do put a map up, you'll see it is called the South China Sea, but it is bordered by maybe close to 10 countries, but it's where Malaysia is, Indonesia, the Philippines, all those groups. And what China has done is basically claimed that entire area for itself, the entire sea, South China Sea for itself, despite the fact that those countries are entitled, according to the UN, to their own maritime economic zone, which goes out to about, I think it's like 10 miles off your coast, is your economic zone. That's your coast. That's your sovereign coast. China is like, no, that's ours too.
Yeah.
And they've even gone so far with the Philippines is they're building bases, and there's a bunch of artificial islands. They were small like sandbars and kind of small uninhabitable islands. China's basically built them up and expanded them so that they're able to support things like runways and barracks, all that stuff for like airfields and like makeshift ports, to really militarize that region. It's also a really kind of a crucial region for trade too. A lot of trade passes through there. It's resource rich. There's oil in there. It's pretty significant territory. But they've, like I said, they've really claimed it for their own, and that's why it was so important for the United States to get back in and make sure that we have a strong presence in the Philippines, because that's really the only ally and the best ally we have close to the southern coast of China. Up on the northern coast of China, you have South Korea and Japan, where we also have significant assets. But down there, closer to Taiwan, that's obviously the major flashpoint, and that's you got to be present there.
Do you know what the vibe is like in those countries? Like, are they do they hate China? Do they are they terrified of China? What's the political landscape like there?
Not being a citizen myself, I can't say I have gone and conducted ground interviews. I can tell you that the Taiwanese government has popular support. They like being independent.
Mm-hmm.
By and large, there's a small Chinese minority there that is probably agitates for rejoining China, but I don't think it's very big at all. I think it's tiny. I think if you're looking at approval for the overall independence of Taiwan within Taiwan, it would be probably 95 to 99%. It would be significant. And that other area, I think for them the mood, if you were gonna do a vibe check, I think you'd say they were nervous. As you would be if you had this kind of more militant, larger neighbor who made it clear that the international rules and international norms don't apply to them, and that they don't really respect them, and that they are intent on basically rewriting those rules in a way that suits them and their purposes and their agenda, then you're going to be nervous. You'd be nervous about not having access to resources that you believe are yours, or transport lanes that you think you have a right to, that you do have a sovereign right to. I think it's pretty scary over there. And plus, you don't want to be any kind of collateral damage. Who knows what could happen if a war does in fact break out, which seems rather likely within the next few years here.
What scares you the most about China?
Oh my God, what scares me the most about China? I don't like to think of myself as being afraid of China. I think overall it's just, I think, the capability and the determination, because like I said, they're kind of playing their own game. They're doing their own thing. They're not out there being affected by the United States or Europe or even allies like Russia or whatever. They're kind of they're pushing their own boundaries, and they're doing their own things. And like I said, that's why they're developing technology that we haven't gotten to yet. They're increasingly willing to use military force and political force. You saw it when they reabsorbed Hong Kong. That happened during the pandemic. It kind of happened in a flash, and it was quickly. You just woke up one day, and it was hey, China took Hong Kong back, and they removed all independence from it, where it had been this kind of semi-independent entity. They just came down. They clamped down on those protests. They can be ruthless, as we've seen in going back to the Tiananmen Square. There's communist regimes. They don't care, man.
Yep.
For them, it's all about the power and keeping power and exercising power and expanding that power. So, they'll do anything for it. You can even see that, again, to a lesser extent in Russia, where it's pretty clear that they'll do anything that they feel that they got to do to gain the leverage that they want.
All right, so I actually want to talk about Russia next, but real quick before we get there, what is your predicted date for when China invades Taiwan?
I gotta think. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say 2026.
2026?
I saw there was a big memo that went around the Pentagon and got into the media. It was written by a 4-star general in the Air Force, and he had it at 2025. He said, and it was based on nothing really but he literally said, my gut is telling me we fight in 2025. And his reasoning was that because that's a presidential election year, basically, 2024 will be, that we'll be in the middle of a presidential transition. and we saw how chaotic the last one was.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know? So like,
So
who
we'll be
knows?
distracted.
Exactly. Or at the very least, you always have that point with an incoming administration, getting everyone up to speed, handing things over and making that whole transition of power. He thinks that opportunity. Also, coincidentally, I'm pretty sure China itself has quote unquote elections in 2024, or I think maybe at the very least. Yeah, because, I mean, technically Xi Jinping's a president, right, even though he's president for life. But they still got to, I guess, go through the motions.
Wait. So I honestly don't even know how that works. Do they have a regular election, or once he's elected, he's president for life?
Well, he rewrote the Constitution. The Communist Party rewrote the Constitution to accommodate that, to make him president for life. Before that, there were terms. They were, and I mean, it was kind of a charade in the sense that, like, the party's going to choose the candidate, and it's a single-party government, so it's not like they're running against opposition so much. It's more about, the party voting and voting for their leader, and that's why Hu Jintao was the Chinese premier before Xi Jinping, and then he stopped, and then Xi Jinping ascended. But he was like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay for a while, like, it was just kind of like, all right, so that's gonna happen. That's all gonna jump off in 2024. I don't. So that's the closest prediction I've seen.
So 2025, 2026.
But
You're saying
I'm
2026.
hoping it'll. Yeah, maybe they'll wait a year.
Yeah,
like maybe
yeah.
for whatever reason.
Do you feel like it's inevitable?
Yeah, it's got to be, right. I mean, it just has to be. It just seems like it's what they're working towards.
Yeah.
And again, we can segue it over because it was the same thing with Russia and Ukraine. It was the same thing with Russia and Crimea. It's like, we're not giving it back. We're gonna take it. We're not giving it back. This is. They use the phrase, this is vital to our national security or whatever. With China, they're obviously very insistent that Taiwan is theirs. It is a part of their country, so.
Do you ever see Taiwan putting up the kind of resistance that we're seeing in the Ukraine, or that's?
I hope. What military officials will tell you is that they got 24 hours to basically stay alive. If they can keep China from basically taking over and debilitating them and overwhelming them within the first day and just buy themselves some time, then that could be enough for like the United States to basically marshal some kind of a response. I don't know what kind of response that would be. It would, I mean, obviously military in some sense. I don't know. I guess you would have to think.
Do you feel like that's necessary or worth it? Like, I mean, I feel like strategically maybe it like I could see the reasoning for it, but like, is that worth like risking war with a nuclear power, like, because they want to take over like a little
Well, it's a
island?
test of U.S. resolve, right?
Yeah.
If we have an ally and a country that we've had this defensive agreement with for whatever it is, the past 70 years, and we don't honor it, what does that say to our other allies? That we have your back unless it looks kind of grim, unless it might actually affect us, like, look.
But is that it though? Is it just a matter of pride? Is it a matter of trying to
it's a
hang on to power?
I think it's more of a matter of upholding the international order.
Yeah.
There are rules, basically. There's a reason why that, outside of internal political fractures, that, like, generally speaking, the borders of countries have remained the borders of countries for the past 75 years.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen wars for territorial gain so much. It's the same way that we had the initial Operation Desert Storm when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. Does Kuwait matter? Well, it does and it doesn't. Like, do the rules matter? Are you just allowed to do this? And then, if so, who's next? It's the old appeasement theory. If you let China take Taiwan, well, maybe Korea's next.
It's a double-edged sword, because I feel like whenever we get into these scraps, it never really actually ends well for us. But at the same time, if you let it happen, then you do have these issues
there's
that you're
really
talking
no
about.
like right answer to it. There's no. There's no way it just resolves peacefully and nicely. There's no way we all just come to terms and go, we just solved this with a discussion. Great.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, wouldn't that be the world we live in?
Let's talk about the Ukraine and the they got these M1 Abrams.
They got the tanks.
Yeah.
The Abrams will probably be the least helpful to them, even though they are the most sophisticated of the group they're getting. They're only getting 31. They're probably going to get, I haven't seen an exact number, but a couple hundred Leopard tanks from Germany. They're made by a German company called Krauss Maffei, and they're German-made tanks. They're effective. They're very similar in build. They're both about 70 tons or so. I think the Leopard's 66 and the Abrams maybe 68 technically, but they're up there around there. The Abrams was made in 1980. The Leopard in 1979, so they're kind of from the same generation of tank. They each have a range of about 3 miles on a 25 millimeter cannon.
Wait, how many?
25 millimeters.
No, sorry, how many miles?
Oh, 3.
3 miles. Okay.
And so
it's fucking crazy.
Yeah, the Abrams are gonna they're gonna be harder to learn on. There's gonna be fewer of them. They're gonna take longer to get there, and they take longer to learn. There's more of a learning curve with them because of the technology, I think, and probably because, there's probably things I think just in the European theater that are more comfortable, or whether it's language or just the nature of things. But the Leopard ones, they're going to get there by March, so it's definitely going to help them. It's a big deal because the big thing that everyone keeps talking about right now in Ukraine, and the thing we're all waiting on, is the spring offensive. They've been warning about it. They thought it was going to happen on the anniversary of the 1-year anniversary of when the war started.
That would be kind of dumb.
Yeah, right. But still, I don't know. Why not? I guess you got to pick.
You got to speculate.
The thing is, it didn't go that well the first time, so I don't know why you would. You got sent running. You basically went into a full-on retreat the last time you tried it.
Yeah.
So, but it's gonna come at some point, because we know that Russia last year called up anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 conscripts, right? And so this whole time through the winter, it's been kind of a stalemate at the front since the last Ukrainian counteroffensive, which was back I think in the fall, and they've had to train these new soldiers as best they could, and basically get them up to speed and get them outfitted. And now it's going to be a matter of getting them out into the field. And I think because the tanks are going to start arriving in March, the timeline probably is, if you're Russia, probably now or never. You're in the next few weeks, because you don't want to wait till the tanks are there.
Sure.
You want to press whatever advantage you have while you have it. And so, because the tanks that are being sent over, both the M1 and the Leopard, are similar, but they are vastly superior to the tanks that Russia is using. Russia has really had a dip into its tank reserves, which it turns out weren't all that great. They've been using basically Cold War era tanks. Their main one that they're using, the T-72, that one was made in 1969. So that was 10 years before.
Wait, they're using tanks from 1969?
Yes.
That's crazy.
And they have a range of about a mile versus 3 miles. They weigh 42 tons as opposed to 68 tons or close to 70 tons for the more modern tanks. They're smaller. They're not as good. Their armor's weaker. Their technology's weaker.
Yeah, I mean, they obviously wouldn't stand a chance against.
No, and a lot of them are in really bad shape. Nobody knows how many functional tanks Russia really has. They have thousands in storage, but a lot of those have been cannibalized, which means they go and you have a tank that breaks down, you take parts from another tank, and so they've kind of got that going on. They were just falling apart. Ukraine captured, I think, 1,000 Russian tanks. They captured or destroyed at least 1,000 tanks last year, and so, moving the new stuff in, they're going to have an even bigger advantage. I know tankers will tell you, well, the tank's only as good as the crew, basically.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter about the weapons are great, and you want the best weapons, but if your tank crew isn't good at communicating, if you don't know what you're doing out there, if you have a driver who puts you in a mud hole, then then that's the problem.
Sure.
As opposed to it, what kind of caliber gun you have or how accurate.
So speaking of things that are maybe pretty difficult to learn, Ukraine is now, at least some officials are asking for the F-16s.
Oh, yeah.
How much is that? Is that a longer learning curve than the Abrams? And then let's just start there.
Yeah, so, I would imagine again, having not operated either of them myself, I think, for professionals, for a professional military, they should be able to get up to speed relatively quickly. Like, I don't think they're so advanced. I think they'll be able to.
Yeah, right. Those are an earlier generation than the
Those
Abrams are. So
they've been around a little bit longer. I feel like they've been around. The F-16's probably been around since the 80s. I think that some of that stuff's a little bit more familiar. That technology, and if it's not, it's probably similar. We've probably seen planes like it. I think they were flying the old Soviet MiGs, so I think it'll be an upgrade over those. Yeah. But that's the thing. We don't even know that they're going to get those. Right now, the position of like the Biden administration is, no, you're not getting the F-16s. But they also said you weren't going to get tanks, and they also said you weren't going to get medium-range missiles.
Yeah, you'll get the F-16s if you need them.
Yeah, pretty much is kind of the way it's gone. And that's been a sticking point for a lot of, military people that I've talked to even, because they're like, if you know you're going to send them the stuff eventually, why not just give it to them early? Like, yeah, it's great that they're sending them the tanks now, but it would have been better months ago.
Yeah, it seems a little like politics, like you're kind of boiling the frogs like slowly.
And the only reason we're even sending the Abrams tanks, because again, they're not going to be that effective. We're only sending 31. It's because Europe wouldn't send its tanks unless we did. It's like they weren't going to do it, or especially Germany was holding up because they make the tank, they can tell you whether or not you can sell it to somebody else. So you can't just you can't buy a German tank and then sell it to.
Sure.
So, they were holding up the transfer, and they wouldn't budge basically until the United States got on board and said, fine, we'll send them tanks too. And that kind of thinking, I do not understand it, but that is the nature of politics. That is, again, the world we live in. It can be frustrating and confusing at times, and so that's where it's at. So eventually, will they get more sophisticated air superiority? Like, maybe. But I'll tell you what, they'll need it if they are going to retake Crimea. And I think the question the United States has to ask itself, and I think the West has to ask, like, are we supporting Ukraine so that it doesn't lose? Or are we supporting them to win?
Yeah.
Like, what do we have? Do you want them to win the war or not? Do you want them to be
able winning the war at this point is retaking Crimea.
Is making Ukraine whole and sending Russian packing in a way that they're not going to come back.
Yeah.
Because the last thing we need is to fight this war again 5 or 10 years from now. Like, it's got to be settled. And I know it's a real red line, and I think that's kind of the thing. I think maybe and I couldn't tell you if there's been back channel negotiations with Russia or anything like that, but I do know that like a lot of the rhetoric about using nuclear bombs that Putin and the Russians were throwing around is kind of dialed down. It's not as overt, it's not as wild as it was there last summer and into the fall, and you kind of wonder if the United States was basically like, and the West was like, look, we'll support them up to a point of self-defense, but not give them enough capability to take back Crimea, to not give them enough capability to really cut off the head of the snake, to really finish this in any way. Because if they are to finish it, that's curtains for Putin himself, right? And I think that's when then you do have an unstable leader, you have a vulnerable autocrat, and it could be trouble.
Trouble for Russia, trouble for the world.
Trouble for everyone.
Yeah.
Trouble for everyone. That's when you think, well, maybe the nukes are on the table.
Yeah.
And I think it's stupid. I don't think it benefits him. We've talked about this a little bit before. I don't think it does not benefit him at all to use nuclear weapons because, one, you're using them on your doorstep. It would be like if we dropped a nuclear bomb in Canada or Mexico. Like, it's right there.
Yeah.
Like, it's gonna impact you too, and it's not great. And even then, what you're gonna drive in and occupy that territory? How are you gonna force a population to live there?
It's scorched earth, literally.
Yeah, obviously. Like there's nothing there. It's just nothing. You just made a pit out of this thing, and it's like well, we can't have it, no one can, and now you just have a radioactive pit next to your country. Like, way to win. And at the same time, the political consequences from the rest of the world would be so significant as to then it would be regime change. Because you've played your last card. That was your ace in the hole now. Now there's no reason for the United States not to give you the Muammar Gaddafi treatment for, lack of a kinder phrase.
Yeah.
Like, now you're done. Your time is done. So that would be an ugly, ugly mess. But I don't know where we're going to get. I don't know. That's the thing. How long this conflict is ultimately going to last at that point, and it does look like it's going to be a bloody stalemate for the foreseeable future. And by foreseeable future, it could be years. We could be sitting here years from now talking about this very thing, with both sides kind of hunkered in, and Crimea still in the middle. And we're trying to figure out what's going to resolve this without a nuclear explosion.
That would be great for the sake of content, but obviously don't want that to happen. All right, so nukes are pretty scary.
Sure.
The only thing that might be scarier, in my opinion, is artificial intelligence. So obviously there's a bunch of stuff going on with artificial intelligence right now with the chat GPT. But I mean, most of this kind of involves like search and chat, and it seems more on a commercial level. Is there any relation or anything that you see going on with with the military industry or the defense industry relating to AI?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're very interested in that. A lot of what I've mentioned too, times it's things like autonomous drone swarms, right? Or what they call loyal wingmen, which is an aerial drone that is deployed from the wing of a larger fighter, just like a missile would be, and then it flies alongside, and then that drone can fly forward and draw fire, deploy munitions itself, jam enemy defenses, or identify targets, help with the targeting. All that good stuff, and you have a drone that does that at a cost of about $5 million versus a cost of $70 million or whatever for an F-35.
Is that all what, Gen 6 or Gen 5?
Yeah, 5. They got those now. They're doing it now. Kratos makes those. And so there's a lot of, it's also, I will say, like with AI, it's a real like kind of catch-all. There's a lot of like machine learning and autonomous stuff. I don't know specifically as it relates to like, chat GPS or anything like that, but
GPS, it's got like it's figuring out it's showing you where to go on a map.
Well,
I should fuck with you.
Yeah, it's another one like with like Palantir. I've talked about Palantir because they have like software that is AI and kind of like machine learning.
That one always, so that company is like so shrouded in mystery that whenever like I hear that they have like an AI thing, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what is that really like?
Well, what they've been doing, and this has been really helpful to Ukraine, and it's given them a huge advantage, is they basically collect satellite data from private corporations or governments. Like Maxar is a big satellite company, right? They've got a whole array of satellites up in the sky, but even like commercial aviation companies like Airbus obviously have satellite because they're very concerned about weather and logistics and all this stuff. So you could tap into this massive blanket of satellite data. And then you have this AI, this software that analyzes it and synthesizes it and basically puts it into a tablet or a laptop for a Ukrainian commander to look at.
Yeah.
And they can see the battlefield not quite in real time, but almost. And, I mean, it can see through clouds and it can find new things. They even have, like, there are agencies out there that, like, they have satellites that can detect fires. So, like, if like a wildfire is about to burn up somewhere, you can detect fires. But they can also detect, it turns out, the fire coming from howitzers and tanks.
Gotcha.
So they can see where that fire is coming from and where it came from on their tablet. And then they can go through there and they can dispatch drones or other munitions or tanks or train their artillery fire on those locations based on that information. Ukrainian forces have been so far ahead in the technology game based on the assistance they've gotten from Western sources, and especially too like that all relies on Elon Musk's Starlink up there, that satellite constellation.
Yeah,
that's what's given them that connectivity and their ability to do that stuff and maintain connection to the internet even when their power stations are being bombed or whatever. And they're going through all these infrastructure crises and everything's getting blown up. They can still see everything that's going on, and they still know, they have a really good idea of where the Russian forces are, where they're going, and what they're doing. And so they're always one step ahead of the game.
We just came full circle back to kind of this surveillance from the sky angle, and I think that's pretty. I feel like that's a good place for us to stop.
Yeah.
Jason, it's awesome to have you on. I mean, every time that you come on here, I feel like it's probably the most interesting conversations. You know your shit, and you want to plug anything before we go?
Well, yeah. So always check out Secret Stock Files because that does deal directly with military technology. All that analysis, and specifically with technology suppliers, to two major defense contractors and the latest weapons and the most cutting-edge technology, warfighting technology that's out there. That's where I look at that. And then in the next few weeks, I think maybe in March, I'm going to be taking up my new official position as an editor on the Wealth Advisory.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll be able to catch me there as well.
And you'll be talking about some income opportunities, more steady,
Yeah, a lot of, well, I think, like I said, with the Secret Stock Files, I've always focused more on smaller cutting-edge companies that do, like, a lot of, really kind of out there avant-garde work. But with that, it's going to be a place, I think, to focus more on the larger defense contractors, which do, pay strong dividends. They raise their dividends a lot. They're always strong, consistent dividend payers. Always good income plays, as well as delivering capital gains, especially if you believe that military budgets are going to continue to rise, which, given what we've talked about here, is pretty much a certainty.
Okay, cool. Jason, thanks for coming on. Everyone who's watching, like, subscribe, and join the Discord using the links below. We'll see you next time.